message me personally if there's anything I'm missing. You guys ready to get going here? For me to talk to Jay Ryan, and then you guys will be able to ask him some questions. I love a good author bio, and Jay's is long, and I posted the whole thing on Facebook. But I just want to tell you some of the parts that I really like that I think you'll enjoy. He grew up in the Midwest in southern Minnesota town of Hastings, where he often failed his driver's license exams. You often failed them?
3 times. That's really interesting.
3 times you failed them. So
I call that often.
Yeah, that's 2. You failed it a couple times. You fail it 3 times. You're a regular.
It's like, are you trying? Failure. Right? Yeah. Maybe this isn't for you. Yeah. There's a city called New York. You might like it. Yeah.
You graduated from Northwestern University. This is probably where you became a Cubs fan. You often slipped on the ice.
Yeah.
And you do not own a gun and a motorcycle, which makes you unique among the men in your extended family. Well, you're probably you'll probably fit in well here. You probably don't have too many packing heat in the chat tonight, but maybe, you never know. If as an icebreaker, tell us if you're packing heat too. That's fine.
Not yet.
You might remember we read Kitchens of the Great Midwest a few years ago. Absolutely loved it. And we asked you guys what would be a fun book to read together during this time, something that would maybe cheer us up in a way. And overwhelmingly, by 2 votes to 1, Lager Queen of Minnesota was our pick. And Jay reached out on Twitter and was like, hey, you know what? Even if you don't pick it, I'm happy, and I would love to chat with you guys sometime. And I was like, guess what? We picked it. And now you got to chat with us. So this is great. I'm really happy to have you. Please welcome Jay Ryan Stradal. Thanks for being here, Jay.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Jay, you live in LA, and you and I talked a little bit ahead of time, and we actually overlapped a little bit in our time there in the late 90s, and we both probably have some things in common out there. And I'm wondering, how are you doing? How is quarantine? How is the QT in LA? If you want to start by telling us how you're doing.
It's been interesting. LA, I don't know, to different extents, hasn't been taking it all that seriously. We're pretty much we live in an apartment, my partner, Brooke, and I, and we're pretty much the only people who wear masks when we leave the place, and it drives us nuts. But then we'll go out into the city, in different parts of the city, like Beechwood Canyon, everyone's wearing a mask. Everyone's 6 feet apart. So it kind of depends where you are. It seems people are very, it has a reputation as kind of a selfish city, and it's coming out in parts of the city for sure. But my personal experience, I'm a writer. I'm fine. I'm home alone all the time anyway. I finished my 3rd book last week, and I don't think I would have finished it so quickly had all of my plans not been canceled. So since then I've been working on a book review for the New York Times, and most importantly, I've been hanging out with my 4-month-old. Let me see if I can get him up here. So he's been one of the reasons that this quarantine hasn't been so bad. Here he is. His name's Audie. Yeah.
Adorable.
He likes hanging out with Dad in his office, which he's been doing. So, yeah.
So cute. Well, congratulations. I didn't know that you were a father. That's fantastic.
Yep, first time. Yeah. And so, being in quarantine with a 4-month-old wasn't probably going to be all that different than being with a 4-month-old. It's just that we're now getting all of our stuff delivered to us as opposed to going out and getting it. The rest of it, we were already kind of cooped up. Yeah.
It's, well, you know what? It's very exciting that you finished your 3rd book, and I'd love to hear about that a little bit later. If you want to tell us anything about that one, we'd love to know.
I see a few people asking about it. Yeah, I can describe a little bit. It's about 2 restaurant families. It's a love story. Oh. First time I've written a love story, at least explicitly. At least it starts that way. And one of the settings is a supper club, but in Minnesota. I didn't put in Wisconsin. I feel like I've never lived in Wisconsin. I can't set it there. I grew up in a part of Minnesota where there were also supper clubs, like including one called Wiederholz, which is still around. And I grew up going there a lot. And I thought, you know what, this is as much ours as it is theirs. And so I'm going to use a supper club as one of the restaurant settings. And it was fun. I was actually planning on being in the Midwest at this time, driving around, doing boots on the ground research. And I've had to, over the last few weeks, last month or so, email and do phone chats with supper club owners, current and former, to get info. So I've been denied the actual experience of brandy old fashions and prime rib specials. And just
That's
had
the
to, yeah,
the brand,
right.
the
I just had
brandy
to,
old fashioned.
right, just had to get the information without any of the tactile pleasure of the supper club experience. But luckily, I've been to supper clubs, uh, dozens, if not hundreds of times in my life. And so I have had a lot of memories of them, and did some preliminary research last fall when I was touring throughout the Midwest. So took a lot of pictures, interviewed people. And so
And
going back would have been, yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
no, I'm sorry. Do you have a publication date for it?
Right now they're saying summer of next year.
Okay.
But we'll see. I have to hand into my agent's reading it right now, and I got to do his notes, and then my editor has to like it. All these things have to happen. I don't have a specific date, but it's supposed to be next summer. I love it. I love these characters. There's a little bit of overlap with Lager Queen and Kitchens, as Lager Queen has a few characters that were in Kitchens show up, and this book has the same thing. A few people that, if you've read my previous books, you'll know them. Yeah.
That is a good question. I would love to
relish
hear,
trays. Someone mentioned relish trays too. Yeah, Lisa, thank you.
If anyone caught, what are the characters that overlap from the two? And I want anyone to call that out in the chat or with their hand before we have to ask Ryan if we can't figure it out ourselves. I'm sorry, I was just trying to get, there are some people who are having a hard time getting in, and I'm sending them the information and still trying to get people in. So if I look a little distracted, I'm just trying to get more people into the show here. All right.
Oh, yeah, and Bridget Treader asked Wiederholtz. Yeah, it's a supper club. It's in Meadsville. It's a little south of Hastings. It's excellent. It's a classic supper club experience, the sort of place where you'll automatically get a brandy old fashioned unless you ask for something else. And at the end of the dinner, they came to my table. It was my brother and I, and they said, "So when do you want your grasshopper? Not, do I want a grasshopper, but when do you want it?"
Yeah, it's right. I remember my mother-in-law was telling me about the dessert drink is included. It's just assumed, and it's coming. Right. It's an ice cream drink and it's coming. So
you want it, believe me.
Save room for it. Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, go Meadsville Mudheads. I see that too. I love that. Yeah.
That's right. They play the Saints. They play the St. Paul Saints, I believe.
Actually, no, they could, but they shouldn't. Yeah. No, they're in a different league. They play the Hastings Hawks and a few other independent teams that are, I don't know how you'd categorize it officially, but it's semi-pro independent ball. Yeah, whereas St. Paul Saints are organized independent ball. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I know. I can't wait for places like supper clubs to be open again either. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be
a town ball. Maybe. Yeah. Thanks, David.
So I've read that you said your characters are cosmonauts of inquiry, which I absolutely love. Great description. So I'm wondering what comes first for you, the subjects that you want these cosmonauts to inquire about, or is it a character comes first and then you decide what it is that they're going to help you learn about, because the characters are, I mean, you have said that you weren't the biggest beer guy until you
more of a wine fan.
Characters, right? Yeah. So what comes first for you? I guess the character or the inquiry, the subject?
Well, I think the inquiry and the subject. Like with supper clubs, I didn't know much about their history. Now I do. I've got a stack of books over here. I watched a film that someone referred to me. I've had people send me books in the mail, like authors who'd written supper club books, like say, "Hey, you're writing this book, read my book." And but yeah, going into this, I didn't know much about it, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about the history and the milieu and what their golden ages were like. But for beer, yeah, same thing. I couldn't have told you much about the difference between, let's say, a lager and an ale. Like, let's go that basic. I knew there was a difference, but I couldn't have told you what the characteristics of those differences were. And I created 3 characters, all of whom start at a point in the story where they know nothing about beer, even Helen. and set them on a path where they're going to discover it. And so their path vis-a-vis learning about beer became mine. So I eventually created 3 characters who taught me everything they needed to know about beer. And through their journey, I learned about beer too.
Excellent. I love these characters. They remind me a bit of the way I feel about Frederick Bachman's characters. I don't know if
Oh,
you've
yeah.
read like A Man Called Uwe,
Oh, that's a tremendous
or
compliment.
Bear
Thank you.
Town. Yeah, and it's some of I mean, other favorites that we've read in this club. And there's not like a bad guy per se. There's not like a really, you know, an antagonist. Everyone has a reason, and you know, you get their perspective, and I think you can feel for them. You know, there are times where, you know, you might dislike one a little more for doing a certain thing, but I think then you get to see them become better people in a way, or fully rounded. And I'm wondering, you know, with these characters, you write such strong women. And what difficulties do you have trying to write in their voice? With both of these books, there are such strong women characters. Does it just come easy for you, or how do you write these women?
Well, I write my books for my mom. She's my reader that I think of when I write. And so I put a lot of her in my characters. Uh, it's it's funny. The first draft of Lager Queen had 9 point of view characters, many of which were men, like Orville, Stanley. They all had point of view chapters. And as the book got winnowed down to the form it is now, I found myself finding that the indispensable characters, the ones I could not tell the story without, were the women. And so I didn't necessarily set out to write a book of 3 female protagonists. They just ended up being the best storytellers and the most essential characters, and probably because I put so much love into them. Like my mom is in each one of these characters. She died 15 years ago, so I feel part of my discipline of writing is to communicate with her and keep her alive. And putting her in my characters is one way I do that.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm sure she would love it if she had a chance to read it, and maybe she is, at least in some way. So
Yeah.
glad that you can keep her alive in that way. You know, I've read also that you've talked about how class struggle might be really more of what you're writing about than necessarily food or beer. And as a Midwesterner, I think, I mean, I could definitely relate to this sort of like this thriftiness that's been passed down. You know, this like you know, you don't waste anything. Everything is, you know, you gotta kind of have to live, like you don't live extravagantly. You just, you know, everyone's kind of just, you know, getting by, and they're not very boastful, and they don't just kind of flaunt things. And I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about how, you know, each of these chapters starts with the dollar amount, and it factors into it, and where you kind of came to that being maybe the format that it's put into. If you could speak about that a bit.
Yeah, the first draft of this book was actually called The Money.
Oh.
Yeah, the first draft privileged the division between the sisters as prominently in the narrative as the beer. Now, as the other characters got reduced, and it came down to just these 3 characters, all of whom had a very strong beer connection, it became kind of obvious to me that, well, this is really more of a beer story than a money story, but it still was very resonant to me, the ways in which money defined the options for each of these 3 characters, and, you know, divided them, set certain limitations or alternatives in front of them. And what was, you know, potentially insignificant amount of money for one character would be a significant amount for the other. And I enjoyed having that contrast, as well as also, you know, I'm this kind of reader, so I like doing this for readers, like give a reader a little bit of an Easter egg in terms of the chapter title, in terms of like, I'm going to read this and I know this dollar amount is going to show up somewhere in this chapter. It's a cheap trick, but I love it. I love writing it. I love reading that kind of stuff. I love that kind of stuff in novels when I read. So I wanted to do that too, but also continue to reflect how this unfair division of resources stemming from this one parent's decision, the father, set these 2 people down economic paths that had ramifications through the generations.
Um, I liked kind of having that in, you know, when is it going to show up? Oh, this is a big money one. Oh, this is a really small amount. Like
Right.
this is going to be kind of insignificant, and kind of waiting for when it was going to happen. And there were times where, yeah, it was kind of foreshadowing of like, oh, wow, this is going to be a big chapter.
Something big is going to happen. Right.
Look at this dollar amount.
Yeah.
So in the all the research that you did, I'm wondering, did you actually find, were brewers like Frank? And did they put their like brewmasters, you know, through such a rigorous, arduous process, or was that kind of like, it was like Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, you know,
Right,
Mr.
right.
Miyagi, what he was doing to her? And I'm wondering, is that, you know, I don't brew myself, so you know, is like 15, 20, 30 different, you know, versions until it's right. You know, he kind of says later it was good at like what 15 or something, but he made so many more.
Which is still pretty harsh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every brewer I spoke to about Frank Schabert's discipline as it came to training Diana to be a brewer, every brewer I spoke to found that to be completely ridiculous. They were like, "Oh no, we wouldn't do that. That's a waste of beer." Yeah. It's like, if they don't get it by 3, they're not a brewer. You know, it's like, I'm not going to make them do it 15 times. But I think I did speak to a couple brewers who thought like, well, there's a couple people I should have done that with, you know, just to see if they could like stand up to the pressure, or like they were kind of amused by the idea, like to the point that, oh yeah, maybe I would do that or would have done that. But I didn't, that's not directly inspired by any one person's experience. Most brewers I met just simply didn't have the resources to throw that much raw material at someone, only to have it, you know, even if it's just a little tiny Blickman boiler, you know, pilot system, you know, they still thought that's you know, that's unnecessary. And so I really wanted it to be that kind of trial by fire. Like he understands that this person coming in isn't the typical apprentice either. This is someone that has to win his trust. This is someone that has no brewery experience. And I think part of it is putting her through the paces so that she can create for herself a certain amount of automatic confidence and competence at brewing that I think she engenders. I think at a certain point she talks about, oh, this has become automatic for me, and I'm not even thinking about the proportions anymore. I'm just doing it. And it's that she starts to unlock her potential as a brewer. And yeah, probably in real life, it wouldn't normally take that long, or it shouldn't. I just wanted him to be unusually harsh.
Yeah. I like that. Even though they told you,
never waste beer. Somebody says,
still have to do that. That's
Did I ever talk to Omar? I tried to talk to Omar. He's actually a friend of a friend, but we could never line up. Probably the most influential brewer I spoke to was the guy that owns Shell down in southern Minnesota. I spoke to him on the phone for about an hour, and he was great. And I talked to his son Kyle as well. Ted and Kyle, and they gave me a lot of the information that went into Helen. Like, what's it like to be a large production lager brewer in the Upper Midwest, and what was it like to outlast, you know, some of these other brands that you now own? Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago they were competing with Grain Belt, and now they own the Grain Belt label. And also to see the rise of the craft brewers amongst them. Like they were contract, Three Floyds, the famous independent brewer out of Indiana, started as a contract brewer at Shell's. Okay. Yeah, they were using the Shell's equipment to make some of their earliest beers. And I didn't know that until I talked to Ted, and Ted's like, yeah, they're probably not really public with that, but who knows? Everyone's got to start somewhere. And it's so interesting to hear how Shell's has been an incubator of competitors in that sense, but also just an incubator of general beer community. And I think that's one of the reasons they've survived, is their agility and warmth within that community. But also, a number of brewers throughout the upper, I think I interviewed around 40. I think I only thanked like 13 or 14 in the book, but they were the 13 or 14 that were most crucial and who went back to multiple times and troubleshot information with.
Excellent. Well, I have more questions, but I also want to
yeah.
start seeing your blue hands. I see some of you have gotten your questions through the chat already, but if you have a question for Jay Ryan, please raise your blue hand and I will unmute you and you can ask him.
I can also get to a question or two from the chat. There is one in the chat from Greg Bastian. How or why did I decide what cities or breweries would be fictional and which would be real? I made certain cities fictional partly because I think it was going to be a little hard on them, and I didn't want to impugn an actual city by having a character criticize it or leave it and feel like I'm getting out of here. Yeah, I can't wait to get out of New Stockholm. You know, I didn't want to pick on Wilmer or Litchfield or any number of other towns it could have been. I thought, like, I've got relatives in Litchfield. I don't want to rip on Litchfield. So, but it's that style of town. It's that, and then in terms of Nicollet Falls, I did kind of have Edina in mind. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The neighborhood that Edith finds herself in is sort of 50th in France. Yeah.
Okay. I kind of figured. Yep.
Don't we all want to make fun of Edina though? Exactly. Yeah. I still could have. I could have named Edina and it would have been fine.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah. Bob says we could tell. Yeah. Like if you're local, you could tell. I mean, that's a huge Easter egg for locals. Like the people in California here, they don't get it, Right. But
and the thing is the Edina people love it because every day they need attention, so they're getting it in your book. It's perfect for them.
I think I make a point of not mentioning Edina in my latest book.
Was it?
I'm going to deny them the next book. Yeah.
So I always wonder about the questions that the publisher puts out for book clubs. Kind of like here are the book club kind of questions, and there's one of them that is I think the last one in your book here, and I want to pose it to you and to anyone here. It'll be something that we talk about, but in your mind, is there a lager queen of Minnesota? Is it one character? Is it more than one? Where you're like, then this is the lager queen? Because is there anyone in particular?
Well, the only character who's called the lager queen, and someone pointed this out in the chat earlier. It comes fairly late in the book, is Edith. And so she's the only one granted that title. I suppose the person with the best claim to it would be Helen, literally, because she makes lager, and she at one point is the most influential lager brewer in Minnesota. Diana does not intend to make lager. She has the least claim to that title from a literal sense, but I think, craft brewing being what it was evolving into before COVID-19, I was seeing a lot of lager coming out of craft breweries. And if she were to hop on that trend, she very easily could be the lager queen of Minnesota.
I don't know if they can hear me or not. They're probably not. I'm getting texts that some people are still in the waiting room, and it says 6 people are waiting, and I'm trying to admit them, but it's not doing anything. And I'm getting notes that people are still trying to get in. And so I'm not sure what the issue is. If someone is a Zoom expert that can help me figure out why I'm not getting them in. Yes.
Debbie's iPad is still showing on the screen and she's not been connected at all. So boot her out and see if she can get back in.
That will only work if she's allowed to come back in. If you've already been admitted and then you're out, a setting has to be made that allows them to come back in. Jeff, can you make me a co-host and I'll investigate?
I could try,
Rebecca, just hover over my name in the participants list, and you under the more, and you should be able to say make co-host.
Let me see here. I can only make you the host. I can't make you the co-host.
Okay, well, make me the host for a moment.
I'll make you the host for now. Okay.
And then I'll give it back, pass it back.
I trust you, Rebecca.
Okay.
You helped get the boomers out, or the bombers out last time.
Boomers. Great.
So yeah, I don't know if I'm not showing, the people aren't showing up on my screen. It says 6 are waiting, but there's no list, and I'm trying to admit them all.
I think Rebecca's on it. I just saw the list go from 47 to 52.
Yeah. Ooh, there were 17 waiting.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know why on mine it's not letting me do that.
It's something probably is hidden. Go on and talk. I got it.
Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca.
You guys go on and talk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, does anyone else have their hand raised? Anyone else have a question for Jay Ryan right now before I go back to my list here? Tony, are you with us? Are you in? Did you get in? He was helping to manage the chat here. Okay, so Jay, one of the things that I ask everybody, kind of like the last thing I ask them usually is, what was their takeaway? You know, like, you read this book, you know, what'd you get from it? And I think it'd be interesting to ask the author that sometimes, because I'm sure, you know, it's all on the page, and we've talked to other authors who've said, well, you know, once I write it, it's out there, right? And whatever you guys have is what it means, right? Which is what you might say, which is fine. But you've talked to a lot of different clubs now. I know you've been great about this, and you went to Lake Monster for this, where we used to meet, and you went to all these places. You've talked to so many readers. Is there anything that people maybe weren't getting that you wish they did? Or should Books and Bars tell you what it is right now? What do you think?
Wow.
What do you want us to take away from this book?
Wow. That it's not too late. One of the things I was missing in a lot of the media I've been encountering, not just books, but film and TV, were what I've been experiencing in my real life with my relatives and friends back in Minnesota, which were people in their 60s and 70s, especially women, having really robust second, or in some cases third acts, like starting new jobs, new careers. I just wasn't seeing that. And I really wanted to have that be a major element in what I was writing. Like, I wanted Edith and her friends to take over a brewery and make it their own, you know, put their own stamp on it and have it be successful on its own terms. That to me was one of the reasons I sat down to write this book. Was I just want to read that. I want to see that in the world. I feel as a novelist, you're a utopian, whether if your writing is utopian or not. I mean, you're creating a world out of scratch. And so it's a world on some level you want to see exist. And I thought, this is what I want to see exist. I want to see a world in which Edith and her friends can come into a brewery and run it, and it's successful, and it's successful on their terms.
I love that. I love, you know, another quote from you and I was going to ask you in relation to what you might be doing next, but you kind of told us already that you said one of the imperatives of fiction, I believe, is to write the story you want to manifest. So I wrote about the kinds of brewers I'd like to have met more often.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. You're putting that out there into the world, what you want. It's fantastic. So also, I love to ask an author, you know, when they have a captive audience like this, if you have any questions of your readers, any questions for, you know, any of us that can answer. And if Jay has one and you guys want to raise your hand, and feel free. If you don't, that's okay too, but you can think about that.
Wow. I've never been asked that before.
Awesome.
I wrote the book with the idea in mind that, well, beer's mentioned in the title, but I have one character in particular, Edith, who doesn't like beer at all, and it takes a long time to get around to liking beer. So I wanted to do my best to make sure that the book also appealed to people who didn't like beer. So I think my biggest question before the book came out was, is that going to happen? You know, and I think you can put the book down after having read it and still not like beer, but maybe understand it a little better. I guess I'm just wondering if anyone tried out a beer they wouldn't have tried otherwise because of this book.
Great question. And along with that, yeah, if you don't like beer, you know, you still like the book too.
You still don't have to like it. Yeah. I mean, this book is not a manifest. It's just, yeah.
I like the idea. I read you were similar to this too, in the sense that you always want to try the one you haven't tried, right? So if I go somewhere and they have, especially if it's the local tap, I want to try the local tap that I haven't tried, even if, you know, I haven't heard a single thing about it. Guess what? I want to let me experience that. So that's kind of like my variety level. I always want to try as many different ones as I can. So I'm totally open to that. There were definitely from the book a list of ones that I want to try that I haven't tried yet. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I was going through my Drizzly app trying to get some of them delivered, but unfortunately they didn't have a lot of them yet. So I think some of them are, you know, depending on what part of the country you're in, whether you can get them or not. That's part of the thing. But yeah, I'm always up for trying something new. Did anyone else? Does anyone else want to try a beer they haven't tried, or anyone that doesn't like beer maybe want to start liking beer now? Anyone?
I see Caitlin mention that she wants to try Pie in the Bottle, and I've had a few versions of that since the book came out. A few brewers have even specifically made them for events I was doing. And I had one from Florida 2 weeks ago called Humble Pie, which of all of them was the most like a pie. It was like drinking a pie. But it's that said, it's been fun to see people attempt it. That one of the things you mentioned, Jeff, about beer drinkers, beer fanatics, or even casual beer fans. I think they have a little more alacrity when it comes to trying new things compared to consumers of other products. One of the things I've enjoyed about writing a book about beer is meeting people like that, meeting people who have that sense of adventure when it comes to trying new things. Also, it helps that with a few minor exceptions, beer never gets too expensive. There's a point above which, like, it's ridiculous to pay that much for a beer, and every beer drinker kind of agrees on that. And so it isn't like this, you know, there's certain legendary beers aren't really that much more, or even the best beers in your zip code or the best beers in your area code, are the ones that are critically acclaimed or whatever, won't cost you that much more, if at all. I've enjoyed hearing the experiences of people who tried new beers. I saw someone else there who said they tried stout for the first time, and people people still like the book even though they still hate beer, hated beer before, still hate it. That's great. Thanks, Cindy. And someone mentioning New Glarus, that was a place I visited during my research, and one of the things I also loved about beer culture is how Midwestern it is historically. How this was a region of the country that had a very robust beer infrastructure before Prohibition. And even into the 70s, when there were maybe between 60 or 70 breweries in the entire country, many of them were concentrated in the Great Lakes region and in the upper Midwest. Like Minnesota had 7 or 8 at one point when other states didn't have any. And I really enjoy seeing how contemporary brewers are honoring that history and using local ingredients and coming up with beer styles and variations on beer styles that are satisfying to people like Jeff that want to try the new thing.
If you love Lager Queen, what should our book club read next? Maybe you want to shine a light on an underappreciated author or book.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Oh, wow. You know what? Yeah, I've got a stack over here. I'll show you a couple things. Hold on.
Okay. Rebecca, how's hosting going for you?
The power is going to my
I've
head.
lost control. Yeah, I can't even see all the chat. I feel like
can't?
You're the new moderator, Rebecca.
When
we go live,
you should be able to see the chat.
It's weird. I don't know. We'll have to talk offline about what's going on with this.
Okay, I'll pass it back. Just people were still coming in, so I was okay.
It's like it's frozen or something for me.
Well, someone asked, "How's the beer in LA?" It's great. The only issue I have with it is that there's only one female brewer in LA County out of about 170 breweries. And guess who was the most helpful to me? That brewery, Three Weavers. If you see Three Weavers in your market, support them. They're incredibly friendly people. They make great beer. They're women-owned, women-operated. They're awesome.
Had you been to Urban Growler in St. Paul?
I've been in communication with them. If I have a paperback tour, there's a good chance one of my events will be at Urban Growler. But that's kind of up in the air at this point.
Well, that
Yeah.
was our last St. Paul live venue.
Oh,
Yeah, so I love their cream ale. Not enough people make a good cream ale, and they had a lot of great stuff. Yeah, all female owned business. Good food too.
yeah. Well,
All
here's
right, you got some books for us?
one book I really enjoyed this year was The Cactus League by Emily Nemens. It's a debut novel. As you can tell from the cover, it's set in the world of baseball, set in
Excellent.
spring training. It's told in a format just like Kitchens of the Great Midwest or Olive Kitteridge, where every chapter is a different point of view character. It progresses through 9 innings. That's the structure. And it tells the story of the drama that happens during spring training in Arizona, centered around one star character, a fictional character. But I loved this book. I read it in just a couple of sittings. The author sent it to me for a blurb, and I just fell just headfirst into it. Yeah, absolutely loved that one. One book I consider to be one of the most underrated books the last 5 years is The Wanderers by Meg Howrey. It came out shortly after The Martian by Andrew Weir, and this book is also about a mission to Mars, but it isn't like The Martian. This is a very character-driven story that happens to take place in an outer space mission. It has absolutely nothing in common with The Martian other than the word Mars. And so a lot of people were down on it because, like, I think the book's publicist or the publicity people behind it were using The Martian as a comparison because it was the only thing out there like that at the time. And it's not. It's a lot closer to like a Kate Atkinson book, like Life After Life or something like that, in terms of its an insight into the inner lives of the characters and what it's like to be on a mission with 2 other people for 3.5 years without communicating with your loved ones. It was tremendously empathetic and insightful book, but it's about the people who happen to work in science and in space, and not about science or space. I also I was asked to review this book for the New York Times. I just finished my review this morning, The End of the Day by Bill Clegg. I loved it. I thought it was great, but I was a fan of his first book too, Did You Ever Have a Family? These are very well told, multiple point of view stories about people coming to terms with trauma in their lives. Yeah, I enjoyed both books very much. Yeah, and this book, like I said, I just finished it, and it's great. It's going to be a kind review. Bill's going to be pleased, I hope. Yeah.
Well, thanks for those. That gives us a few to go on.
Oh yeah, thank you, Caitlin Cohn, for writing them down. Yeah, for putting them in the
So just so you guys know, I just sent a test to everyone and no one responded. So for some reason, my group chat is not working. I also don't see anyone's hand up. Are there any hands up? I can't tell on my screen. Are there any blue hands that are raised? Because there's none on my screen. I don't know what's going on with my Zoom. And I still show people in the waiting room. So I don't know. Rebecca, did you try to pass it back to me? Because
I did.
You did? And did it? So my chat is not going through.
Oh, so someone's been asking, this is the second time I've seen this question, was the Blotz family modeled after a real brewery family? It was not. I was pretty careful not to do that. I actually really, I know some up and down family histories, like the Strohs. Like I read Frances Stroh's book, and I met her. I talked to her for a little bit, and that helped clue me into some of the traps that a lager family could have fallen into in the 80s and 90s, and it informed some of the things that the Blotz family had to navigate. But it certainly was not based on them. It was a composite whole cloth out of a number of brewery families.
Caitlin lets me know
and not Blatz. Yeah, not Blatz either. Yeah, I made sure to mention Blatz in the book so people didn't think I meant Blatz. Yeah.
When I first saw Blatz, I thought for sure you were talking about Blatz, and it was like shots in Laverne and Shirley.
Right.
Brewery.
Yeah, exactly.
Schlemazel. All right, Eileen apparently has her hand up. Eileen, I'm unmuting you.
Oh, and I had no involvement in the audiobook. Someone asked me that. Like, no, I approve of it though. I think Judith Ivey did a great job, but
she did.
I didn't choose. I think I could have shot her down. Like I'm given the option of saying no if I felt really strongly about someone, but when I heard that she was going to be the person to do it, I said, "Oh, please go ahead. Yeah, awesome." Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, it was good. I think a lot of people, we've gotten sort of in the habit of these regional books to listen to them because we like to hear the narrations the way they come across. I am a lager person before moving to Minnesota and before the craft beer craze. I'm actually drinking a juicy IPA, which is not
Oh,
my
wow.
first choice.
Oh, wow. From where?
Summit Slugfest.
Oh, great.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Good. But it wouldn't have been something I would have chosen before moving to Minnesota and since reading this book either. So, you know, now I'm willing to try a few things. I actually thought early on in the book you were going to tie Edith's award-winning pie making line with Helen's beer making line, and that's how we were going to get the queens there, you know, all tied together. They were both going to be successful.
There's still that potential.
It
Yeah.
was really
That's the
sorta
missing
sad.
chapter at the end. That could happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Could
kind of
happen now.
sad for me that that Edith's life really just kept not getting any elevation until right at the end. And I was just like, who said this was a happy book, read, as, you know, an upper? I was like, where did they get that idea? Jeff, they tell you the wrong title? So, no,
everybody always thinks I pick sad and dark and depressing books. So they're pleasantly surprised if I pick something that isn't like that. And yeah, I get worried about, if I say it's going to be, you know, uplifting and it's not uplifting enough, then people are like, is this your idea of fun? I see Katie Kiesau had her hand up. I mean, I don't see it, but luckily Caitlin told me. So I'm unmuting Katie now. Katie, hopefully you can talk. I'm trying. There you go.
I love this book on so many levels.
Oh, thank you.
Born and raised in the Midwest, I identified with the super stubborn Helen, the really like meek Edith, who just kind of was even keel, was really content with life, and that was just okay. I'm currently drinking a coffee porter from Uncommon Loon. Not my favorite, but you know, I had never been there before. I'm a stout and porter girl. The darker and heavier, the better. But I will try damn near any beer. Also, I really had to laugh at the way you totally encapsulated many drunken nights at the bar with friends when you created the drink lots, it's lots. Just that like epiphany moment of like, I have it. It's like the best idea ever. And it just like worked. So very good book. Thank you for writing it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much for the kind words.
Okay,
I want to say hi to Carolyn Nichols real quick. Thanks for the comment. Yeah, I love Vickers. I always make a point of doing events there when I'm traveling in the north. When I arranged my northern Wisconsin part of my tour, I love going to Vickers, and I stopped in there randomly one day and signed stock. Yeah, and it's cool to hear from the person who was working that day. That's awesome.
Okay, I'm looking for Caitlin. You have your hand up, but it is not making it easy for me to find you with my frozen system here. Caitlin, if you're able to unmute yourself, go for it until I can get you.
Oh.
Am I hearing her? Rebecca, I want to pass it back to you because it's not allowing me to, I'm not able to get her.
Yes. Fine.
Okay, I'm coming back to you. We'll figure out my tech issues next time. Here we go. Please put your hands together for your new host, Rebecca A. Moss. Can you find Caitlin and unmute her?
The rest of us
I've
can hear her, Jeff.
Yeah, I've got her. Yeah.
That's, it's like I'm not even in Books and Bars anymore. I don't even know. I am totally out of it. It's not working for me.
Jeff?
Okay.
Well,
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you and we can hear Caitlin.
Okay. I wish I could hear Caitlin.
Maybe it's because you didn't admit her?
Oh, maybe.
I don't know. But Rebecca did, right? Okay, she tells me there's no other hands up right now and everyone can hear her except for me, and everyone can hear me. Okay. Well, Rebecca, do you see anyone else with a question for
Well,
Terry?
Jeff,
well,
first
Caitlin,
we're gonna let
can you-
Caitlin, we're gonna let Caitlin finish her comment,
Yes.
and then I'll tell you when she
Sorry.
finishes.
Okay.
Oh, sounds great. I haven't tried that one yet. Yeah. Exactly. Like how some people like vermouth in a martini, right? Yeah. Oh, thanks, Caitlin. Oh, thanks. Oh, thanks, Caitlin. Oh, thank you. And I appreciate hearing that from a researcher too. Yeah, I spent 3.5 years researching and writing this book, and so it means a lot to hear that. Yeah. Oh, good. I hope you write that book. I'd read it. Okay, I've got an infant. Yeah. Thanks.
Ryan, why don't you just continue asking questions? Can you see the raised hands?
I can't see the raised hands. Hold on. Let me
Do
go
you have
into
the
let me
participants
go into
list?
gallery view or something.
Or participants list. It's at the
Participants
bottom.
list. I see it. Okay.
And so it'll be on top of the chat now, and the people with the blue raised hands will be at the top. In the meantime,
Okay.
I'll get to Jeff on back channels.
Okay. Let's see. I don't see any blue raised hands on.
There's there was Caitlin and then there's Terry Wendell.
Okay. All right, I see Terry Wendell. Let's see. It was Caitlin first.
I think Caitlin just finished talking, so you want to move
okay,
to
great,
Terry.
great.
Yep.
Yeah, great.
I
Hi,
was
Terry.
able. Hi, Ryan.
Hi,
Really
hi.
enjoyed the book.
Thank you.
I'm coming to you guys live from the Dallas, Texas area.
Oh, awesome.
Ruby Redbird Shiner is one of my favorites. It's a red grapefruit that we have down in Texas. And then also there's a local Armadillo Ale House that has some really good, they have one, it's mesquite bean and honey. So it's very, very interesting. So I don't know if it's really a question or a question you want to answer, but I was kind of touched by some of the ways you talked about the Alzheimer's, the husband who had the Alzheimer's, and then there was also a section grief and how in private, you kind of are using up the things that belong to that person, like a pen or a coffee cup. So
Yep.
I just didn't know if you'd had it, you may not want to talk about it, but it just seemed like you had a real grasp of that feeling. So
all of it completely lifted from real life. Yeah. Things that I've been waiting to read in books, that I put in mine because I had that experience and I assumed other people might too. I think part of why we write is to feel less alone. And one of the ways, or one of the times in my life where I felt like alone, or at least bereft, was when I was grieving my mom's death in particular. And I find myself putting that experience into my work a lot when a character loses someone they love. And I love thinking about those details and thinking about how I'm trying to communicate something that I would have wanted to read at the time. I do that too, just based on my Minnesota settings. I mean, I grew up a kid in southern Minnesota, and there was John Hassler and Tim O'Brien, were a couple writers I read in high school who set things in Minnesota, but now there's a bunch. But one of the, as I started progressing through my career as a writer, and I realized, oh, I can write the books I want to see in the world. I wanted more books set in Minnesota or set in the Midwest, because it seems every time I pick up a book, it's set in New England or California or the South or something, and I just go, can't I just have another book set? I want the problem of having too many books set in the Midwest. And so between pulling from my own life experience and writing about grief, and also pulling from what my child and teenage reader in me wanted to read growing up, that's all of it right there. Yeah. Thanks for the question. I always appreciate questions about grief, because it finds its way into every one of my books.
Rachel G was the next person with her hand up.
Hello.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. Oh, hi, Rachel. Oh, man, I love your backdrop.
Well, thank you.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
My husband built this for us, so we're
Oh my God.
all the
Great
rack.
dude. Yeah.
So I thought I'd give the background for today. And I'm drinking Ursa Minor Brewing, which I just recently
Oh yeah.
and which I really love, and Citrus Blizzard, fruit lactose sour, which is very fun.
Wow. Yeah.
The lactose pouch is not like a Stampers, but it's really tasty. I just wanted to thank you for kind of including the female-centric thing about brewing, and like that's the origins is female brewers, and
Yeah.
all that gets lost. Because I'm thinking back of like, I went to a brewery like a year ago or two that I've only been back to like maybe once, but the guy was chatting about what they had. He's like, oh, we're gonna have a couple sours because we want the guys to bring their wife in, so we got wife beer. And I'm like, wife beer? Like, women started beer,
Come on, exactly, right. You're here because of a woman, dude.
Right, yeah, and I just, there's nothing wrong with being a wife or anything like that, but the tone of voice that came with wife beer was a little
right.
But I just so I really just wanted to say I appreciated that a lot, and just
oh, thanks.
The female roles in it, and that it's just, I know you said that you mentioned that some of the point of views were going to be male as well, but it was just fun to like, it's a beer book and it's women's point of view, and I just I loved it, so I just want to say thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for reading it. Thank you for the kind words.
Thanks.
Kevin Thompson had his hand up next.
Hi.
Hi, Kevin. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too. You've talked a lot about your research into breweries for this book, but I was wondering, because a lot of it takes place in assisted living facilities or nursing homes.
Mm-hmm.
What was your research, or what informed your writing on that? Because I felt like a lot of that rang true, especially from working in a kitchen in one.
Oh, yeah. Well, my grandma worked at a kitchen in one. I've been going to them my whole life because my grandma worked in the kitchen. Like that part of Edith is my grandma Doris in a huge way. And Doris would bring my brother and I to the nursing home she worked in to visit the residents that didn't have visitors. And through that, we kind of had third, fourth, fifth, sixth grandmothers, which as a little kid, you're thinking like, oh, wow, we're visiting these other old ladies who give us candy and want to, talk to us. We watch Wheel of Fortune with them and Jeopardy with them. And it's fun, we thought about it as recipients. And it took a while for me to realize that I'm part of an exchange here, that this is an emotional experience, that I'm not just getting treats from somebody, but I'm participating in their lives in a meaningful way. And I continue doing that. I mean, my whole life now my grandma is in a nursing home. And so that's the bulk of my contemporary nursing home experience. But all through my childhood and teenage years, I was visiting them and visiting people that didn't otherwise have visitors in them. And so that experience really colored my impression of them and my impression of the residents, and how it's also, just like Minnesota can be not a frequent setting for fiction, but it's a pretty common setting in a person's life. All of us, I'm sure, know somebody who's in assisted living. I mean, I know 3 people right off the top of my head, and yet it's not the sort of thing that's written about, or if it is written about, it's written about in a way that I find can be kind of reductionist or simplistic. And I wanted to write about it from the point of view of someone working there and someone who has a lot of empathy and generosity to the people working there. And in essence, a replication of my grandmother's experience there. Like, she'd bring in desserts for not everybody, like Doris being Doris, like for the people she liked. But, you know, like she'd go above and beyond in her own way, you know, to look after the people she identified as needing something extra, and would bring my brother and I in to meet those people and hang out with them. And I just thought, like, wow, what a special thing to do, you know, when I became old enough to realize that was a special thing to do. And I've always wanted to write about it. And in this narrative, I finally had the opportunity. Yeah, so thank you. I'm glad, you know, I'm glad for the work you do. It's not easy. I hung out in that kitchen a lot as a kid. Yeah, so yeah, I know the environment in which you work, and I'm grateful to hear. I'm honored to hear that I was able to honor that in some way. It's a privilege to me to do that.
Kara, is that right? Kara.
Hi, Kara. Hey, great poster, Kara. Love that film. Yeah. It's excellent. In Harper's Ferry. It's cool. I get a lot of questions about, are there really people like Edith? Like, I think I was actually asked that question in San Francisco. And I thought, boy, this is why I wrote this book, you know, to get them out there in the world, you know, to give them more representation. Yeah, I know a lot of women like Edith. A few like Helen, a few like Diana, but the Ediths of the world were the ones not getting enough attention, in my opinion. And I really wanted to read about one, and so I figured I'd better write it. Yeah. So, yeah, but on both coasts, you know, the movie Fargo in particular casts a pretty long shadow. And I feel like I'm just trying to add to the conversation of a broader representation of Minnesotan culture that isn't completely reduced to the characterizations of that movie. I mean, I like the movie and the TV show, but that is obviously not the totality of who Minnesotans are. But unfortunately, on the coasts, it's what they know. And so I'm having to fight to get from underneath that blanket a lot, and add voices to the conversation of what is a Minnesotan. And Edith, Helen, and Diana are my latest attempt to do that. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's true for Edith. Edith wouldn't toot her own horn, and what's interesting is that Helen, although she's more ambitious, also doesn't really toot her own horn. I remember writing at one point in the book that she thinks back and looks, well, maybe if it ended up on some magazine covers, that could have made a difference, but that just isn't her personality. I mean, she worked from behind the scenes for so long because quite frankly, that's where she was content, like actually running things and not just appearing to run things, not just appearing to be responsible, but actually being responsible. And that's what the women I knew growing up were like. Oh yeah, I did see someone say, like, appreciate that you don't have characters say "you betcha." Yeah, that's a conscious decision. Yeah, I don't know anyone who says it. That's something that people say when they're imitating a Minnesotan, but I don't know many Minnesotans who say that.
5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Oh, thanks, B. All right.
We got 5
However, like, I
minutes.
do know people who say "ope." Ope had to make the book. Like, yeah, I had to give it one appearance because, yeah, you can't get out from under that word.
It sounds like you are limited on time, but the next person was Cat Bart. I don't know who Cat Bart is.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Okay, perfect.
Hi,
I'll be
Cat
quick
Bart. Nice
then.
to meet you.
Thank you so much for writing this book. Edith is both of my grandmothers, so
Oh.
it definitely exists. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't finished the book, but I found it really touching that Edith, like in one line to Helen, was just like, "Don't leave me," and that was forgiveness for like 50 years of heartache. Did you always intend to have that ending with them, or did you kind of go back and forth?
I did. That I thought of that ending before I even started writing page 1. Yeah, and what's funny is page 1 actually wasn't page 1. The first scene I wrote that ended up making the book was the scene where Edith is at Marvin Garden's place and going through brochures. That was the first scene I wrote. Was like I wanted to write because I was talking, having an earlier conversation with someone who works in the kitchen of a nursing home, and he mentioned how unusual that was, and that was an early goal of mine. I wanted to write from a point of view of a character who wanted to work in a nursing home and wanted to be in one, and that's why that was the first scene. But yeah, I always knew that would be the ending. I always knew that at the heart of this drama would be sisters that were separated by half a century, and I wanted to get them together again somehow. Partially because that's happened on both sides of my own family. Each, like, being born in Minnesota with farm families on both sides, I've got unevenly divided farmland issues on both sides of the family that have resulted in siblings not speaking to each other for a very long time on both sides of the family. So I started with that drama. I knew how I wanted to end it. So yeah, thanks, Kat.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for reading.
The last hand raised is Michelle Maxwell.
Hi. Oh, hi, Michelle. Yeah, you bet. Yeah, great to meet you. Oh. Oh, you are? Oh, awesome. Yeah, yeah. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. And it's great to hear from someone from Litchfield. That's actually where my grandfather and my mom are both buried. Yeah, I never lived in Litchfield, but long ago, my grandfather bought some family plots there when he was living there, or when his relatives were. And that's where everyone's getting buried, whether or not we've ever lived there. So I've been to Litchfield many times for funerals and to visit the graves of family members, but that's about it. Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah. Yeah, anyway, no, I like the town. It's cool. It's a beautiful town. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I see a large question about like Prescott, the scenic Point Douglas, St. Croix River. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's right by where I grew up. I drove to that area when I was researching the book to try to get that in my head, and also try to figure out where I would put Blott's Brewery, because I wanted to put Blott's Brewery somewhere in there between Hastings and Prescott. So yeah, thanks.
Jay, there was a question about the criminal activity and how you ended up putting that into it.
Oh yeah, I love to start my characters really far from where they end up, And the criminal activity is actually inspired by something that my grandmother, Esther, experienced. Something that she did in the 1950s when she was pregnant with my Uncle Paul. She was in the grocery store, and she was walking out with her bags, and this is like 1957. And she realized that she was about to go into labor, or going into labor. You know, she had to get to the hospital. She just has these bags of groceries. She's miles from home. And the first person she sees walking up to her is like the town thief. Like, everybody knows this guy's the town thief. And she just says, like, here's my groceries. Just like, what? Hold on to them. You know, just give them back to me. I got to go to the hospital. And he's like, you know who I am, right? And he's like, and she says to him, I do. And I think you can do better. And, you know, what do you know? Like, he gives every single one of those things back to her. And part of why I wanted Diana to have that experience was I wanted someone to expect better of her. This was someone who I feel like hadn't been challenged in a way that she could have been. And I wanted to put her into a situation where, you know, she could rise to that challenge. But starting her at a really low point put her in a situation where I was also able to, you know, demonstrate an instance of real grace and real forgiveness. And, you know, I like seeing that in life. I like seeing it in books. I wanted to have a character like Frank offer that, and not conditionally. You know, of course, he puts her through some real paces, but he still says, you know what, this is, you know, I'm going to do this for you. And she rises to the challenge and, you know, more than exceeds like his and her own expectations. And in my opinion, that's, you know, I volunteer with high school kids here in Los Angeles. I see all sorts of kids every day who, well, not lately, but I had been seeing a lot of high school kids who were like one like grace note, one piece of forgiveness, one access point away from realizing their potential. And it really sticks with me, you know, just how much that can make a difference in a person's life. And I wanted to demonstrate someone like, okay, yeah, she's made a series of mistakes. It wasn't even like she made one mistake. It's like she has a habitual habit of committing crime. But, you know, if you understand a person and have the willingness to forgive them, you know, perhaps they can impress you and impress themselves in the process. And yeah, I really wanted to write about that.
If you have time, Mimi had her hand up as well.
Okay, yeah, I'll do one more for Mimi and then I gotta go. Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh yeah, a real quick question for Lisa. Overlapping characters. Maureen O'Brien is the prominent one. She was the sous chef for Eva in Kitchens, and she's in this one working at the bakery. Edgar K. Quill shows up in most of my books. He's a retired cop in this book. He ate Eva's hot pepper sauce in the first book at a restaurant willingly. And Eva gets a very like backhanded, like opaque mention in this book. Like at one point, like a supper club chef is mentioned. Yeah. And that's Eva. Yeah, I'd say those three are the prominent characters.
Mimi, are you able to unmute yourself to ask your question since your hand was raised?
Yes. Okay.
Oh, hi, Mimi. Nice to meet you.
Yes, hi, nice to meet you. And I think it's kind of appropriate that I'm toward the end here, because I just want to applaud your writing. I just appreciate your attention to detail. And because I'm sitting here in Prescott drinking an old
you're in Prescott. Oh my God, I love it. I love it. Cheers.
Had a beer.
Cheers.
I
love Prescott. I used to work there. I used to work at the Steamboat Inn.
I can tell.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. That goes back to, yeah, our young dating days. But I was kind of hoping you'd have time to read this in yourself rather than me read it. But I just, the quote here, you're describing from Minnesota, where I'm sitting right now, and it's, I'll pick it up at the scenic Point Douglas, your point of view, at the spot where the sparkling St. Croix River loses its fortune against the merciless bluffs of the Mississippi. That is poetry.
Oh, thanks.
And I look at that every day. My front yard is half blue, half brown,
Yeah.
the two rivers. And so that is just pure poetry, and I love it. Followed by Orville liked it because they could see Wisconsin from his office, and now Wisconsin could see him back, shirtless, brushing his teeth, scratching his crotch in the morning sun. Reality, mise-en-scene reality. And so that is just applaudable writing, and that I'll end with that. It's just beautiful.
Oh, thanks. That's very sweet. Thank you.
Jay, thank you for taking the time. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for taking the time. Can't wait to read your third book. And good luck with the rest of your quarantine and that baby.
Oh,
Have
thank
some
you so
fun.
much.
We'll be in touch. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ryan.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Ryan.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Ryan.
Bye.